What should we do as Christians when we see corruption in our political or religious leaders? In Micah's time, the poor were subjugated and they had no social or economic power. Individually and collectively, the nation claimed to depend on God, whom they knew and believed to be the ultimate lover of justice. However, the leaders were cynical and perverted righteousness. Micah's prophecy began with a general announcement to Samaria and Jerusalem that God had a case to present against the nations of Israel and Judah, which brings us to our key verse for today, which reads, "Know, O people, the Lord has told you what is good, and this is what he requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Micah 6, verse 8. The book of Micah is a prophetic judgment against the royal family and other leaders in Judah during the reigns of kings Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, as well as those who support them. Micah accuses these leaders of treating the people badly as though they are food. The leaders of both nations are taking from the poor and oppressed in order to make themselves wealthy in a kingdom of utter corruption. They are so corrupt that those who try to do good are despised, while those who do evil are celebrated. The corrupt leaders are accused of taking the flesh off people's bones and using them as stew meat to feed themselves. Greed rules the day in a way that values profits over human lives. The Lord, though, through Micah, accuses them of hating or abhorring what is just. They are not instructing people with fairness, but seeking their own gain and pursuing personal agendas. Instead of using tithes and offerings to establish places of worship, the religious leaders have taken from the poor and, in some instances, killed to expand Jerusalem. Such capital activities are performed at the expense of the oppressed and less fortunate. Micah again compels Judah to re-examine its political and social ethics. The rulers who govern civic and state affairs are corrupt. The priests who dictate religious standards practice evil. The prophets who speak the word of the Lord only do it for money. Micah contends that Judah's leadership has turned away from the Lord. Those in power only want to be compensated by their subjects for what God has gifted and instructed them to do. Rulers give judgment for a bribe, priests teach for a price, and prophets give oracles for money. Micah stresses the greed and insatiable materialism pervading Judah. These leaders, however, believe that what they do is good and pleasing in the eyes of the Lord. They are convinced that since Zion is the dwelling place of God, and that since Hebrews are God's chosen people, all is well, and their transgressions can be overlooked. Because Judah has become prideful and sinful, the Lord, through Micah, predicts its ensuing destruction. The crassness of the leaders will result in the leveling of Jerusalem and its temple. Micah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, is written like a court trial between God and Israel. In the rhetorical trial, first God takes the side of the defendant. God asks them what he has done that would cause the people of Israel to turn their backs on him. What did God do that would make them pursue wickedness instead of righteousness? Then Micah's prophecy switches sides. If God is not guilty, then Israel must pay restitution to God. They must give God what he is owed for their injustice against him. They are the ones who failed in keeping the covenant, not God. Then God tells them what he wants. He wants them to do justly, be merciful, and walk humbly and in humility with him. So here's our lesson. Obedience to God is better than sacrifice. God wants his people to pursue justice, care for the poor, and be merciful, meaning non-judgmental and patient with others, the same way he is patient with us. God wants us to recognize we are all sinful and make mistakes. He also wants us to receive his grace and humility. We do not deserve God's grace. The debt of our sin is too great to repay God, so God continues to give the Israelites opportunities to obey him and keep his covenant. The covenant calls for justice, mercy, and humility. It is summed up as love God and our neighbors as ourselves. We must obey as living sacrifices because we cannot atone with material